Victress FM, brought to you by Victress Entrepreneurs. Here's your host, single mum, entrepreneur and brain injury survivor, Michelle Williams.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Victress FM, where every week I'll be introducing you to inspiring women who have gone after their dreams and refuse to give up even in the face of extreme adversity. We'll be diving into her victories and her defeats and discovering the lessons that she's learnt along the way, all with the aim of inspiring you to step into your own unique power to create a business and life that you love. And today I was joined by the fabulous Lisa Zawrotny of positivelyproductive.com. Lisa is a holistic productivity coach certified in time management and life coaching who helps her chronically overwhelmed clients find success through simplicity and self-care. During this episode, we talk about the deeply overwhelming time in Lisa's life, which inspired her to help others reduce overwhelm and increase productivity and well-being. I'm sure as female entrepreneurs, we will all recognise the symptoms of mental clutter and overwhelm. So stay tuned for some valuable tips on how we can all reduce burnout and increase productivity. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Victress FM, where I'm really delighted to welcome onto the show Lisa Zawrotny. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on the show because obviously we connected quite recently, and as you know, the theme of Victress FM is all about celebrating women's triumph over adversity, and I'm really interested in exploring how sometimes some of those adversities that we go through take us onto our entrepreneurial path, and I'm really interested in digging in to find out sort of what it takes to move from victim to victorious entrepreneur. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your victorious story of, some of the adversities that you've been through and how that's taken you onto the amazing path that you're on today.
Yeah, I would be happy to share and to also say that, it's an ongoing journey, but one of the biggest moments that I want to share is what brought me to the business that I currently have as a holistic productivity coach. And that actually came from being a caregiver for my mom. I moved her in, she had Alzheimer's, and I moved her into my home around the same time that I was actually having my children. So it was a very unusual sandwich caregiver situation, as they call it. And it was exceedingly difficult. And it's hard for me to say that because I can see both sides as I look back. I can see how hard it was and how much I need to honor that, because if I don't, I do myself and others a disservice. And yet at the same time, I can also see that it is absolutely the thing that has put me where I am today. I would not be doing what I'm doing today if it weren't for that experience.
And it must have been so challenging because, you said, obviously caring for your mum with Alzheimer's, which must be so challenging in itself, and also being a mum as well. So I have to take my hat off to you because that must have been incredibly difficult.
Thank you. It was everything that you would imagine. It was, physically and mentally exhausting, and also, as important, emotionally exhausting. And what essentially came of it was learning to let go of so much, of letting go of the non-essentials, but unfortunately too, being in a situation where I had to make a choice to let go of what I now see were essentials as well. And also experiencing an immense amount of what I now deem as clutter, essentially. And I mean, it was physically, leaving papers, untended and trying to clean the home as much as I could, but having to let go of doing so many things in order to focus on what was truly important in the moment. And when I was finally able to kind of lift my head up and look around when she had passed on and no longer needed my care, and I was stunned at the amount of clutter and chaos that was surrounding me. And during that time, the only thing that I could think to do to heal myself and to heal my family was to declutter. But I did it in what I now realizes two ways. I obviously did the physical surroundings and started to just go through everything, as difficult as it was, to clear a path. But then I also cleared one inside myself by really coming back to my own self-care and listening to inspiring thought leaders and developing a gratitude practice and really understanding what I almost lost. It was like having a scare, if you will, like when you have a life or death situation, and it's a wake-up call. And it was a wake-up call for me to realize that there's so much that's critical in terms of how I care for myself. And those two sides of it, the inner and the outer, made such a profound difference in my life, that I knew that I had to do it for others. I had to help others do that. And that's what I do as a coach now.
Yeah. So how, because I do resonate with that, because I feel all of us have got, this clutter, emotional clutter, physical clutter, and for me personally, it causes brain fog, if there's too much clutter. So how did you go about that process yourself of what you call decluttering? How did you help yourself and heal yourself? And then, what are you doing now to help others?
Right. The first thing that I did was start with the physical. And so I actually, before I became a productivity coach, I was a professional organizer, because that's the tangible, that physical, the clutter that we can see. It's a great place to start, actually. And I do believe that our inner and outer environments really reflect on each other. And sometimes the clutter you see surrounding you physically is a manifestation of what's going on internally, and other times it can exacerbate what's going on internally and create that brain fog that you're talking about. So I think it's one of those things where sometimes wherever you can reach out and start, whatever feels like a good starting place, that's the place to go, because it'll start to impact the other side of it, if that makes sense. So even picking up an object, or what it feels like when you clean out a closet and then you walk by it and you breathe easier, right? Yeah. Right. So
I do, yeah.
So I think it's grabbing that moment, that space, wherever you can, to, I think, starting with the physical would be a great place if you're not feeling sure. Otherwise, sometimes people will come to me and they would rather deal with kind of the brain fog. And usually what I say is, when you have overwhelm, it's not always about having too much. It's sometimes simply about not knowing what to do next. And so whether it's getting rid of things to do, like decluttering your to-do list, or simply parceling it out so that you know what you truly need to be focusing on, either way, that will release some of that pressure that you're feeling that causes that brain fog. So.
Yeah, I love that, because I know, certainly from my point of view, quite often I feel totally overwhelmed because there's too much on my to-do list, and it's kind of like, knowing what to focus on, prioritizing things. But I personally, I won't go into my story, but I actually had a brain hemorrhage a few years ago. So part of, although physically I'm doing really well, I do have cognitive issues, and some of those things revolve around memory, attention, concentration, and also I'm easily distracted. I didn't used to be, but that's the new consequence of my brain injury. So this is that's why I was so excited to have you on the show, because this is certainly something that I struggle with. But I know for so many female entrepreneurs, because we've got these big goals, these big things that we want to achieve, and all these tasks that, associated with those. And I think sometimes we don't know what to do first, do we? And we become so overwhelmed that we actually end up going around in circles and not actually achieving very much at all. I certainly know that can be the case for me. But yeah, do you find that with your clients? And, if so, what kind of strategies can we use to overcome those things?
No, this is absolutely on point. And whether it's something, like a chronic illness or a brain injury, or simply, I think what we take on ourselves, especially as women, we want to balance all these things in our lives, being the nurturers. I work with a number of, moms and caregivers as well. And then also wanting to create something special and having all of these things happening at once and wanting to do all the things, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think any of those situations can cause that challenge. And I think the biggest thing is understanding our values and our thresholds. And what I mean by that is I'm very value-based in saying, well, what truly matters to you? And that was the life lesson that I had from being a caregiver and realizing, okay, how do I really want to live? I want to be with my children at this point, and I also want to create something greater for the world. How do I balance these two things? But understanding, those core values that we have, they create these filters for the choices that we're going to make. And that's critically important. And then the next thing, and this is all like, if you think about it, it really matches physical decluttering. And I have a system that I use called the Simple System, and it's 6 steps that starts with deciding, okay, something needs to change, and then identifying how to live. And so the next thing after that, when you're talking about that like emotional or mental overwhelm, is understanding the limit that you have. If you need more rest than others, you have to be so careful not to compare what it is that others are doing, but understand the pace that you need to be working at. Some of us have to do a marathon even when we want to do a sprint, because that's what's going to keep us healthiest and honoring our values.
And I would say that I've always been somebody that's guilty of that. I've always tried to do a sprint when really I need to be doing a marathon. But I don't think I'm alone in that, because you mentioned sort of like doing all the things. I think that, particularly if you're a mum trying to run a business, which, I started in business about 18 years ago. And so I, as a single parent actually, so I was trying to juggle running a business with raising 2 children and trying to do all the things. And, but I'm still, I find that it's still something that I struggle with, because although my children are older now, they're sort of 21 and coming on 18, you never stopped it being a parent. And in a way, as they get older, they get a little bit more demanding, because they put different types of demands on you. And I'm certainly somebody that's guilty of that, wanting to do all the things, and I find it really difficult to find that balance. So what would you say? You say there's sort of like 6 steps. What are the main things that we need to do with this sort of physical and mental decluttering? Because certainly I think that's something that many of us struggle with really, so much, particularly if we're female entrepreneurs and mums as well.
Right. Well, I'll take you quickly through the 6 steps, which anyone can use to actually physically declutter a space, but then you can also see how they can apply to the choices that we're making in terms of all the things that we're wanting to do. So step 1, the S in simple, is setting your intention and your goals, and setting a schedule for yourself to understand when you're going to be making these choices, doing this decluttering. That could also be setting a time to review and look at our calendars and understand our plans and our goals. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the doing and wanting to feel productive in a way where it's action related, that we don't realize the other elements of productivity, which have to do with really reviewing and making choices about what it is that we're doing, and understanding like the impact of what we've done so far, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So step number 1, it's that's the big part of the mindset of saying, okay, something is not working. What kind of changes can I make? When do I make them? How do I set aside time and really set myself up for success? The second step, I, is the identifying, and that is, how do you want to live? How do you want this space to be used? That space could be your time on the calendar, your time in the day. It could be, a room in your home, whatever it happens to be. That's where we get into, what are your values? What are you trying to achieve? What's your your why. Like, I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. Start with why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And really understanding your driving purpose behind all of that. This is where, as I said, you're creating your filters. The M in simple is matching, and that's actually in professional organizer lingo. We talk a lot about like with like. That's where you start pulling out all the things that belong together to understand. This could be your to-do list if we're talking about a mental side of it. It could be, all the books and all the bookcases that you have. So you're understanding the bigger picture. You're understanding, maybe like you said, you're sitting back and saying, I want to do all the things, and you're looking at that list and you're like, no human can do all those things in this amount of time. What was I thinking? But of course, there's a lot of passion that drives you to that. But this is where we get real on the big picture. That's step number 3. And then step number 4, the P in simple, is for paring down. And this is what people think of when they think of decluttering. But think about the fact that you have 3 steps prior to that set you up to properly pare. Now you know how to make those choices. You know that it is, like, for example, with me, important for me to be, home to do homework with my children, to understand where I want to be at what times, and what's driving me to do what I do, right? Yeah. And so then you start making those choices. But the next step, the L in simple, actually is like a partner with the P for pairing, and that's limiting. And it sounds the same, but it's not. And here's why. You can pare down with filters of saying, this is important to me, this is a priority, but ultimately we have a limit. We have a limit of the containers that we have in our lives, the space that we work in, the amount of time in the day, that we need, especially when it comes to being, time that we need for our health and well-being. And so limiting based on, what we have to work with, those containers, is critical. And then the final step is the E in simple, and that's for evaluating. And this is like a two-sided coin almost, where we need to be evaluating what we've done, the choices that we've made, what we have decluttered, what's working. But we also need to keep evaluating what's coming in at us, because life doesn't happen in a vacuum. So even if we do a beautiful decluttering job and get set, what's going to happen next? People are going to be asking us for things. More obligations are going to come in, and we need to be ready to evaluate those properly and see if they fit.
Yeah, I love that. And would you say, obviously from the adversity that you went through, and obviously caring for your mum, and that feeling of chaos and clutter that you described, were these the processes that you went through initially? Because you talk about gratitude and self-care as well. So were these the same steps, or have you kind of refined these as you've gone through, and from your own life experiences?
Oh, I've definitely refined them. So what we're talking about today is from the benefit of not only what I sort of stumbled upon on my own, but then have also come to understand working with so many different clients. Some of them, like I said, coming to me from a physical standpoint of saying, okay, we need to organize this room. And then others coming to me from I'm utterly overwhelmed, and I don't know how to be properly productive. So that's definitely a refinement from what I did, but the elements I realized were all there. I may have done them slightly out of sequence or done a bit more trial and error, but the one thing I do want to encourage everyone who's listening is that this set of steps is meant to be repeated. So don't feel as though you've tried it and then, there's something. That's the one thing I don't want anyone to feel, is like when you get that feeling of what's wrong with me, why can't I do this? This is something that is absolutely universal, especially when you're passionate and when you care. And I think women entrepreneurs, that's been my experience, is that they are some of the most passionate, caring people that I've ever met. And when you have that, that's the double-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think obviously if you're a female entrepreneur, it is because you must have a huge why, huge vision of what you want to achieve. And I think sometimes because of that passion, we can become so sort of, I guess, just so overwhelmed because we're trying to do everything. We're just trying to do everything, and then it becomes too much and too overwhelming. But so do I understand it correctly then? So from you initially started sort of almost helping people more with clearing their physical, decluttering physically, and then your business evolved more into sort of helping with, the productivity, like you say, becoming a productivity coach. Is that how it evolved for you?
That's exactly what happened, because the physical side of it was very tangible, and it was a very easy thing to start with. And I love doing it, and I still do it to this day, because I think they play off of each other so much. It's so important to have our inner and our outer environments working together. But from day one, I could see that my job as an organizer was so much less about moving the objects around, but it was about making those choices, and it was about listening to the stories, and about understanding the priorities and the reasons, and the psychology behind it was and the emotion was so powerful. So I actually went and got my life coach certification in order to serve my clients better. And I knew, especially with my passion for productivity, but my passion for productivity has always been to redefine it. Productivity was not about the doing more, but about the being more, about being more efficient with what we do to make space for that real living that we want to do. And so that was my redefining of it. And so that's why I shifted into productivity coaching, but I still work with the mindset, and I work with the physical space as well, all together.
I love that, because I'm really interested in exploring how, because I speak to so many what I would like to call purpose-driven female entrepreneurs whose businesses have started through their adversity. So it's kind of like, if you hadn't have been through what you went through and experienced that, that clutter and chaos, if you like, then you wouldn't be on this journey now and helping the people that you help now, would you?
No. And I always think of this, and I talk about gratitude. I have a great deal of gratitude for this adversity, and it's not easy to get to that point, but I can see it. I can see it so clearly now. Retrospective is always a little easier to see that, I guess.
Yeah. And do you feel like that the adversity that you've been through, that it was kind of like it happened for a reason? It was meant to teach you these lessons, or what's your feeling on that?
Oh, I do. I think it was absolutely meant to teach me this. I think that it was such a gift to me to kind of wake up and understand what's really and truly important in my world and in this world, and to realize that I can help others do that, and set them up for not just success, but like the ability to manage what life throws at them. I can help them not only be more productive, but be more calm in the face of adversity. It's that idea of you can't control the waves, but you can learn how to surf. And that's what I can help people do. And I think all the time about how this is, light coming from darkness, and how beautiful is that.
Yeah, and that it's just a topic that I'm so fascinated with, because I know, and the reason that I started Victress FM is really looking back on my own experiences, because my first business was born almost about 18 years ago, but that started actually because I was fired from my job for being pregnant, and I went through a horrible sex discrimination tribunal. I lost my baby, and it was such a horrible time, but it was actually that adversity that kind of started my entrepreneurial journey sort of back 18 years ago. And so it's something that I've been interested in. And again, obviously after suffering a brain hemorrhage 3 years ago, it's kind of my own entrepreneurial journey is evolving. This is how my Victress FM and my business Victress Entrepreneurs has come out, is really, I feel like sometimes, you know, whether you're, you know, spiritual, religious, I feel like sometimes the universe gives us clues of what we're meant to be doing and to put us on a new path. And so do you feel that as well?
I do. I absolutely do, because the more that I explore this and the more that I help people, and that's what I've always loved to do. But this is such a profound way to do it. And, you know, every time there's another aha moment, every time I'm able to share more with more people and see those changes, it, you know, it heals me.
Yeah.
It continues to heal me. And I think when we go through these truly difficult times, if we are able to take those opportunities, we're able to take what we've learned and do something with it, it gives it more purpose. Because I'd hate to think of, you know, experiencing something so difficult and then sitting there and thinking, okay, what was the point of that?
Yeah.
Whereas when we take this, and this is a choice that we're making, to say, okay, how can I turn this around? What did I learn? What is the opportunity in this? Or at the very least, I say, when we start to share it, I love what you're doing. I love that you're telling stories. You're sharing these stories, because we need to share this. It's inspiring to know that other women are doing this too, and that there's something greater here. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to ask you as well, because obviously starting your own business is a challenge. It's not easy, is it? And it's certainly not for the faint-hearted. So, you know, you've gone through all that adversity, you know, with, you know, caring for your mum, and obviously, you know, sadly losing your mum and raising children. So, you know, how did you do it, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had in sort of starting and growing your business, would you say?
Well, for starters, I was already down the entrepreneurial path, because that was something that I had grown up with, you know. Okay. I think it just had it in my blood. And my husband and I had actually had a photography business during this time that this had happened, and we had to close that up. And I'd done a number of other, you know, types of businesses here and there. I would call them, like, you know, starter businesses and things like that, even trying the network marketing and so forth. And then at the time in which I decided, okay, it's time to help others, it was really just taking that one step. And that's often how these things are born, where I simply said, this is what I'm doing. This is how I want to help people. And I talked to people, and the first person, my first client, said, yes, I need your help decluttering. I need your help organizing, come over. And so I began that. And of course, having a little bit of the business background and understanding some of the details, I knew what was involved.
Yeah.
So, but then it's a matter of reaching out and networking and asking questions and just one step at a time. But I knew it's what I wanted to do. And then, as you know, you described it so beautifully, it just sort of transformed from there. So I may not have known that I would be sitting here chatting with you today as a holistic productivity coach, you know, but I knew that I wanted to help people and use and share what I'd learned.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Yeah, I love that. And do you personally have any daily rituals or routines that keep you sort of, you know, because I think mindset is so important in business. I just wondered if you've got any daily rituals or routines which you personally use, which keep you in that positive frame of mind and always focused on, you know, success and being the best version of yourself.
I think although I tend to vacillate myself just because of circumstances and sometimes liking to change things up, I enjoy meditating and journaling, but the real key thread that I've mentioned already, and I will mention again, always, is gratitude. I have a gratitude ritual every single day, and I've actually sort of transformed that ritual into an ongoing awareness. And I share gratitude with others too. It was, I think, over a year and a half ago, I decided to start a free Facebook group to coach people in developing their own gratitude practice. And at the time, I just knew it was something I wanted to share, and I didn't link it to what I was doing. It felt like sort of an outlier of what I was doing. But as it grew, I realized that it was not just a gift for others because I knew how powerful it was for me, but it was really a power habit. If you look at the high achievers, success leaves clues, and you see all the high achievers out there who've done incredible things, the things they have in common are that they exercise, they meditate, and they have gratitude rituals. They express their gratitude. Those are some of the common things. And I've realized it's such a powerful thing for us to do. So that is by far the thing that I hold on to the most, and I express in a variety of ways each day.
I love that, and it's so lovely to hear you say that, because obviously interviewing all the people that I do every week on Victress FM, I'm trying to understand, what does it take to move from victim to victorious entrepreneur and overcome that adversity. And it is coming up again, time and time again, meditation, journaling, gratitude, obviously vision, having that why. And so it's so interesting that you say that. But how did you get into that? Because we can argue that when somebody's going through adversity, or has just trying to come through that adversity, it might be difficult for them to feel gratitude. So how did that come about for you in discovering that?
Yeah, I love that you're asking this. And it just so happens in my gratitude group this week is the week that I'm exploring gratitude in adversity. So it's perfect timing that we're talking about this. The idea is, and it was one of the most profound thoughts that I had ever considered, actually. And you can find this in a variety of thought leaders. Robert Emmons is one of the foremost thought leaders on gratitude. He has a number of books. And it's this idea that you can feel gratitude even when you are utterly devastated, because it is not happiness about something that is happening. It is about an appreciation of something, whether it's that in that moment or in your life at the moment. And so my best advice is it's always about starting very small and about basic awareness. You might be hurting so much, and my heart goes out to you if you are, and I've been there, and I'm still there for different reasons. But in that moment, there's always a glimmer. It's like finding that little ember so you can stoke the fire and build it again. There's something in there, and it could just simply be gratitude for the fact that we're having this conversation right now and someone understands you, or that you're hearing a positive word, or you have a dear friend, or that the sun is shining, or that you aren't hungry at the moment, whatever it happens to be. So my advice is always to start with just basic awareness, and you don't always have to feel like it needs to be this grandiose thing where it's connected to whatever you're going through. At some point, you may be able to connect the fact that it was an opportunity and a life lesson, like what you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
But that can be way too much, like trying to run a marathon and you're sitting on the couch. You got to start really small with, you know what I mean? And maybe something that doesn't relate to that. Like, we're hurting so much, but at least my family is together.
Yeah.
Or whatever, you know what I mean? So that's my advice for that. I know that it's difficult when you're hurting the most to find gratitude, but just, something small.
Yeah, and I do love that. And I mean, I go every week to a brain injury rehabilitation charity for cognitive rehabilitation therapy, and there's all people there have had different types of brain injury. Some people, they're affected more, cognitively. Some people physically, maybe disabled, or whatever. And I know, seeing some of the people that have been affected by a brain injury, depression can be so huge, because particularly if it's somebody that's was able-bodied and all of a sudden they're in a wheelchair or something and they can't walk, they can't kick their football around the garden with their children and things like that. And so it's something we talk about at the brain injury charity that we go through, and it's really, I think, focusing gratitude, I think, is, because there is always something to be grateful for, isn't there?
Yes.
Always something to be grateful for. And I think it's more about trying to focus on the good things that you do have, rather than getting completely consumed with the negative things that are weighing us down, because otherwise you get sucked into that spiral that just takes you down and down and down. That's how I feel, and I don't know what you think about that, but that's why personally I feel that gratitude has really helped for me as well. Yeah,
I think it's so important to acknowledge when we're hurting. I mean, I said it at the very beginning of our conversation that I wanted to acknowledge how much that difficult time, and as I said, there have been more since then as well, and you do a disservice when you don't acknowledge that. But it's that idea of, if you fall down, don't stay there. And so the idea with gratitude is not to ignore or to not honor the difficulties, but rather, as I said, to find that little ember and to grow it, because really what you focus on, you will fuel, you will grow. And when you find something to be grateful for, you will find more things to be grateful for, I promise you.
Yeah, I love that. And now some of the guests that I speak to as well talk about, they gain a lot of help from affirmations or inspirational quotes and things like that. Are there any other things like that you find helpful in staying in that that victress mindset, I'm going to call it, that winning mindset?
I've definitely done affirmations. I really like talking to myself realistically and sort of encouraging myself in like the progress that I've made, because sometimes I feel like affirmations can feel so removed from, and I guess maybe I tend to coach both myself and others in a way that talks a lot about the baby steps in creating the habits. But I think for me, visualizing is really big. I enjoy vision boards. I've hosted some vision board workshops before, and this idea of saying, what do you want this to look like? What am I, how am I going to show up? I think the biggest thing when you're not sure is to simply say, what can you control? Well, you can control how you show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned Robert Emmons, and are there any other sort of books or podcasts or anything that you either read or listen to that, again, keep you uplifted and inspired and, focused on moving forward to your goal and your vision?
Well, I think for me, it tends to be more relating to what I need in the moment. And maybe that's the productivity coach in me. I'm a just-in-time learner, where I like to say, well, what is it that you need right at this moment? Do you need to listen to someone talk about gratitude, or do you need to focus on a detail of your business so that you feel more confident in it? There are so many out there. I did mention Simon Sinek, Start With Why. I love, the deeper philosophies. And then for me, I guess maybe on the purpose-driven side, Greg McKeown's Essentialism, that's a book that's really made a difference for me. So I tend to recommend that a great deal.
Okay.
It's a hard one to say because I've read so many and listened to so many, and it really depends upon where you are in the process. For me, sometimes I start with the conversation. I find a group that's relating to the kind of support that I need, and I start with the conversation. I will say this though, as part of how I coach, it's very important to me to understand sort of the tendencies behind or underlying the actions that we take. And of course, there are the personality quizzes relating to Myers-Briggs, whether you're introverted or extroverted and so forth. And Gretchen Rubin, I'm actually a big fan of hers as well. And she does, cover gratitude and happiness with the Happiness Project and Better Than Before. She talks a great deal about habits. So that's all in line with what I coach. And the 4 tendencies is a construct that she actually researched and created to help us understand how we show up, whether it's an internal motivator or an external motivator. And there are 4 categories that she came up with: the upholder, the obliger, the questioner, and the rebel. And you can take the quiz online for free if you just search for Gretchen Rubin 4 tendencies. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I love finding that out, because when we understand what drives us, like the obligers, for example, probably 70% of the population really need the external accountability, because they will do for others before they do for themselves. And I mean this in an accountability standpoint. It's not that the other types are not also selfless, but that they need that external accountability in order to make sure that they do something. For example, if they want to read a book, having a book group, external accountability is critical for them, truly critical. I am a questioner, which makes sense because I'm a coach. So it's all internal for me. Once I truly understand the value in something and I've asked all the questions and I gather the data and I make the choice, then I will make it happen. So I wanted to mention her because she has a number of amazing and inspiring books. And I really think that the 4 tendencies construct that she has is so helpful in understanding, how we function and how we show up, because then we can start creating habits that are much more effective for us.
Yeah. I love that. I always ask this of the guests, and so I've got so many recommendations of books and things now, and every time somebody tells me, that's a great book, I'm going to get it, I go straight onto Amazon and buy it. And I could open a bookshop now with the amount of books that I've got, which I'm slowly trying to get through. But yeah, that sounds another amazing thing to go and look at. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I wanted to kind of ask as well, in light of everything that you have been through, from all of that adversity that you went through to where you are now, really just if you could go back in time and give yourself, your younger self a really good piece of advice, what that would be.
Well, I've often said that I really don't like to live with regrets. I think that we, absolutely do the best we can with what we know at the time. But if there were one thing that I would want to change, it would probably surprise me back then. And I would say it's the self-care, Lisa. You need to care for yourself. We hear this all the time. We hear the word bandied about. We hear the phrase, put your oxygen mask on first in the airplane. We hear it, but I don't always think that we get it. And this was a lesson really taught to me because, I was not in good physical health, after the fact. And I'm lucky to be as healthy as I am today, but it's been a long road back. And if I could change one thing, it would be my understanding of how critical self-care is and how it is not optional.
I think obviously it must have been really difficult anyway with, what you were going through, raising children and, caring as well for your mother. But I think it's something that women are typically not that great at, particularly mums, and particularly mums that are running businesses, because again, it's back to that juggling, isn't it? And
absolutely.
And I think we always have a tendency to put ourselves last. I certainly have, because, there's so many hours in the day, but I think having, got so ill, I think, it was a ruptured brain aneurysm that caused my brain hemorrhage. But I have to look back and think, was that because, I didn't put enough self-care in, I was working 24/7, and I so it is so important. But also I think, and I've started to do this much more now, since I've, recovering from a brain hemorrhage, I do make sure that I have time for myself. And what I've noticed actually is you have your best creative thinking, don't you? Because I think there's a saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes.
It's so true, isn't it?
It is absolutely true. It's one of my favorite self-care sayings, actually. And it's so interesting that we sometimes need something so extreme to happen to us to understand the import or to almost take the choice away from us in a way. And I know that it comes from a good place. It comes from a truly nurturing place. But yeah, I'm a self-care advocate in a huge way.
Yeah. So, what are some of your self-care practices then? Because I know you've mentioned about gratitude and everything, but because I think that's something that a lot of women do struggle with, is making that time. So do you have some particular self-care practices?
Well, I'll tell you, sleep is a big one. And, and I know that sounds funny, but it's true. I mean, taking care of myself. And I notice that when it slips, because let me tell you something, I screw up constantly. This is an ongoing process, and I'm with all of you in this challenge. And when I screw up, I can feel the difference. I don't show up as well. I'm so much more frustrated, and I have less patience, and I can't function as well. So one of the first things that I will do when I feel like things aren't quite right is I will say, okay, it's nap time, and I will take a nap. I will do things that allow my mind to be free, because I'm a big overanalyzer and a big thinker. So I will do things like reading for pleasure, even if it's only a few minutes. I think sometimes we feel like the things that we want to do for ourselves that are good for us aren't, if we don't do it big, it's not enough. So if anyone can take one little takeaway from this conversation today, beyond the gratitude and the decluttering, I would say is that the small steps really truly do count. And so, a 10-minute nap or just even a 10-minute close your eyes and relax and don't think of anything. Or reading 10 pages of a book for pleasure, or I love to listen to music, and that kind of just changes my outlook, especially if I start singing along like crazy. And doing things that really light me up, and the things that I mentioned actually do. Quiet time, cuddles, watching. I love puppy piling on the couch with my kids and watching a good movie, and things that give me a break from the pressures. And also too, self-care, it comes from nourishing my body as well. I'm a big believer in that it's not always about the pampering. I mean, I love a pedicure, don't get me wrong, but it's also about the right kinds of foods that will energize me and will make me feel really good and not, make me feel drained. So ice cream is one of them, however, but yeah, so those are definitely some of the things. I try to touch upon the different areas of my life that I know when I nourish, they tend to light me up and make me show up better.
Yeah. So, because for me, it's just being outside and walking, and I think particularly in the online world, because again, that's the thing that can make our heads feel very cluttered, can't it? With, all the social media, all the hashtags, everything that we have to do. So I think it's, from my point of view, it's really important for me to really reconnect back with the natural world. And I know if I haven't had enough time outside, I really notice that. And then I tend to begin to feel very, very overwhelmed, because everything's stuck in my head. And I think whatever you can find for you that helps you to declutter your mind, is such a valuable thing to do. So for me, it's literally going out with my dog and having a good walk. So that's certainly what I do. I wanted to ask as well, because we're going to have to kind of wrap up the show quite soon, but I just wanted to ask, with what you're doing now with your business, which obviously is amazing, and obviously I know, will help so many people, what kind of difference do you most want to make in the world with your business?
I want to inspire people to realize that whatever they're going through, whatever overwhelm they're experiencing, it's not them, and that I want to help, especially women, release that shame that we tend to feel, that pressure that we feel like we have to do it all ourselves, and that there's something wrong with us when we can't, and that we must do all the things. I want to release those emotional burdens, and I want to inspire others to know that we're all in this together. We are not alone, and that you can do this. This is absolutely adjustable, learnable, fixable. There's steps that you can take and that you can learn and grow into, even if you feel like you are absolutely trapped in whatever's happening. It's possible. So that's.
I love that because we all need to believe it's possible, because sometimes I think so many of us are, we have this goal, but sometimes we're telling ourselves it's not possible. So I love that. And I know we talked beforehand about, whether you had like a free gift or something to offer the listeners of Victress FM. And I know that you talked about a worksheet. So I wonder if you could explain a little bit about that and how people could get hold of that.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about that because I have a free resources page on my website, so you'll have access to it that way. And it's called the Joy List. And it occurred to me a while back when we were, I was talking with self-care, about self-care with my clients, and that it'd be like, well, what does that even mean? I think it's so important that we define these things. So it's a wonderful and easy worksheet. It would take just a couple of minutes to do, where there's some prompts, there's some questions for you to answer, where you can start to create your own self-care guide, where you can understand, maybe you haven't stopped to think, what lights me up? What energizes me? What do I love to do? What do I lose track of time doing? And so this worksheet allows you to reflect for just a few minutes and come up with some things that you truly love doing, and then you can use that to incorporate in, think about it each week. Have I done some of those things that I love to do? Am I getting that into the calendar along with the other things? Because that's so important for when we want to keep that balance. Part of it is taking care of ourselves. So.
Yeah, I think it's so important. We've got to have that balance, haven't we? And I think, so many of us haven't. And, certainly in the past, I haven't. I've definitely now I'm making sure that I do have that balance, but it's something that I've struggled with, and I know that I'm not alone. So I really want to thank you for coming on the show and talking about what you're doing, because I found it really interesting and inspiring. And if people want to get in touch with you, connect with you, and find out more, how can they do that?
Well, they can find me on my website, which is positivelyproductive.com. And if they hang out on Facebook, I'm at Positively Productive. Or if you're an Instagram kind of person, you can find me at positively_Lisa. I would love to hear from you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Well, I'll make sure that all of those links are included on the show notes and also over on the Victress Entrepreneurs website as well. But yeah, I just want to thank you so much again, Lisa, for coming on and sharing your Victress story and helping us to understand, what it takes to move from victim to Victress entrepreneur, because you've done that so successfully. And I love that you're helping other women to do the same through, really overcoming that chaos and clutter and becoming more productive in their businesses and their lives. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was truly my pleasure. I love what you're doing, and I'm honored to have been able to share my story.
Thank you so much, and I'll definitely connect with you again very soon. Bye-bye for now, Lisa.
Bye.
And to you, our wonderful Victress FM listeners, I hope that you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have. Don't forget, if you want to find out more about Lisa, please either check out the show notes or head over to victressentrepreneurs.com, where all of our podcast guests are featured on our website. Please also check out all of our amazing free resources to help you through each stage of starting, launching and growing your own business. And don't forget to subscribe to Victress FM on iTunes or Stitcher to make sure that you don't miss out on another inspiring episode. And finally, please come over and join our free community, Victorious Female Entrepreneurs, over on Facebook. I look forward to connecting with you in the group, but until next week, stay victorious.
You're listening to Victress FM. Victress Entrepreneurs, for women who are victorious in business and in life.